Do you know what August 3rd is? Today. There's one in every crowd. Today is the beginning of Sturgis Bike Rally. Oh, now that's where I took my wife for our honeymoon. I did. So all of you ladies who are married, turn to your spouse and say, thank you. At least you didn't take me to Sturgis. We did. We went to Sturgis, and Karen's from Southern California, and my brother lives out in Sturgis, and I had bikes. And so, long story short, most of my clothing was black T-shirts and jeans. She dressed me that first day at Sturgis in teal shorts and a pink shirt.
Pictures.
Yeah, no, we got pictures, trust me. Walking down Sturgis, which is a sea of black, and the person in front of us, this woman in front of us, she had her colors on, and it said, property of so-and-so from the Banditos. And my wife is like, property of... I said, shh. She could hurt both of us. Just stop. Just stop. Well, we started a series in Colossians in June, and then we took a little 4-week hiatus. First of all, our staff just does a fantastic job, and we're so pleased with everybody. We're blessed. We really are. But I had a little surgery on my shoulder. I think they had 3 major tears, they said, and then AC joint had 3, spiky things that were pushing into a nerve, and it's going great. I'm doing wonderful. So everything is great. I just have to wear this. No. Thank you. God bless America. Keep it coming. So no, they said 2 to 4 more weeks on this thing. Actually, what they did tell me is they said, you're doing so well. Your concern for you is that you don't overdo it. I'm not supposed to lift more than 1 pound. Well, that's really hard when you have a really cute 8-month-old grandbaby living at home who's putting her hands up and saying, Papa, you're the best. And I'm like, ah. So we started this book on Colossians. So just to remind us, Paul's writing to the church in Colossae. We don't know. He's in jail. We don't know where he's in prison. Rome or Ephesus, it doesn't matter. He's got a disciple named Epaphras. Epaphras is planting these churches, and Colossae is just 11 miles south of a church called Laodicea. That's a town. And you know that name because you've read the book of Revelation, and that's one of the churches of Asia Minor. That's kind of saying, I got this against you. And so Epaphras went and started this church, and more than likely it was 2 or 3 house churches. So there might have only been 30 people or less in this church. But it's growing and doing some pretty powerful things, and so Paul's addressing them. Now, in the first part of the first 2 chapters, what he's doing is he's reminding them Jesus is the gospel. Jesus is the whole reason we're doing what we're doing. Jesus is fully God and fully man. You need to understand that story. And once he gets that established, he's saying, since Jesus is God, and you're a child of God, you now know your identity. This is how you should therefore live. So in theological circles, we call this spiritual formation. And it gets deeper than this. We've talked about it before. It gets more complex, but just in the very simplest form, when you first give your life to Jesus, you become a child, an infant in the faith. And you're learning to believe, and you're like little birds. We just want to know more and more about God. And it's really fun to preach to. I remember being in that stage. It's fun to learn. Here's the concern. The concern is at some point in time, you start growing up. And you say then, you have to learn to feed yourself, because if all you do is eat once a week at church, that's not going to be enough. I don't know about you, but my mom always had breakfast, lunch, and dinner for us. But if I came in and said, Mom, I'm hungry for a snack, she'd say, well, you know where the bread is. You know where the peanut butter is, the jelly. Make yourself a sandwich. So you have to start feeding yourself. Now, here's the concern. The temptation is, I don't want to feed myself. I'm lazy, so I'm going to go to another church that has multiple Bible studies, so all I get to do is sit and eat spiritual food and get spiritually fat and not do anything with it. But I have a lot of head knowledge. But if you'll choose to start to not only believe, but then grow your faith, then you move to spiritual adolescence. And this is where you learn to live in community. This is when you realize when your parents say, pick up after yourself, because you live in shared space. So the living room isn't just your place. Everybody's going to be there. The kitchen, clean up after yourself. Otherwise, it's very selfish. And you're not being considerate of others. Now, the temptation here is sometimes we just don't want to grow. We just want to live in our parents' basement the rest of our life and not do any growth whatsoever. But if you're willing to grow, then you get to spiritual parents. And that's learning to accept responsibility. That's when you say to yourself, I really want that Harley. But I need to put a roof over my head, clothes on my kids' back, and food on the table. You start to do sacrifices. So you realize sometimes financially we have to really push to keep the gospel moving. So you have to be generous with your finances. You sacrifice and you let God's ways begin to change your ways. And that's where Paul is at right now in chapter 3 with the Colossians. And so here's what he says. Do not lie to each other. By the way, he's talking to church people now. These are people who have said they've been baptized and filled with the Holy Spirit. So this is church people. Don't lie to each other, since you have taken off your old self with its practices and put on the new self. So let's pause. My old self was Creighton, and the practices of my old self was to make sure Creighton got everything he wanted and needed. And so I was consumed with Creighton. Now, when I gave my life to Jesus, I have a new self. The new self is Jesus. So now I have to learn how to be consumed with Jesus. That's why I have to spend time in the scriptures daily. So I know how to hear his voice when I spend time in prayer or I'm out and about. I know how to navigate. These are the things that Jesus does. So I start putting on different practices, and I do that by renewing myself in the knowledge of the scriptures. Then he gives us a description of who's coming to this church. Here there is no Greek or Jew, circumcised or uncircumcised, barbarian, Scythian, slave or free. So in that world, you had diversity. We have diversity. Even here at Faithbridge, and people say, well, I don't know. We don't have as much color as I'd like to see. Well, me neither. But here's what we do have. We have Roman Catholic background. We have Lutheran background. And the Lutherans just aren't all ELCA. They're Wisconsin Synod. They're Missouri Synod. God bless you for figuring out what all that means. You have your different Presbyterians that attend here. You have your United Methodists. You have your Baptists, your Pentecostals, your Charismatics, your unchurched. You guys are just a ride to try to pastor. You are. Because y'all come from your different streams and you come to me with all these different things. I'm like, yep, I know. Yeah, I know. We're learning to live in shared community, in shared faith. So at this church, you had the Jews who stood up and said, we're the chosen ones. Well, we're a little bit more important than everybody else. I mean, God liked us so much that he gave us a mark on the outside of our bodies. So we are different than everyone else. So there's Jew and there's Greek, and Greek is everybody who's not Jewish. But then you had the Greeks that stepped up. And they said, well, you know, the Greek Empire is a pretty big deal. Hellenization changed the whole world, and it did. So much so that when Roman Empire, one of the greatest empires ever, came along, it just took over most of the Greek understanding because you had such good philosophy and teaching and understanding. You know that America is basically based on Greek Hellenization and the Latin foundation. That's pretty much how we do our whole learning system, how our whole government's set up. Everything is set up based upon that. Now, outside of the Greeks, when they would go outside past Hellenization, you'd run into other people who they called barbarians. Now, why'd they call them barbarians? True story. Because when they met them and they started talking Greek, they realized they went past the boundary of Hellenization when they would talk to them, and what they'd get back is bar, 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 bar. It sounded like they're just saying wah, 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 wah. And they said, oh, these are barbarians. That's what we're going to call them because we can't understand a word they're saying. The barbarians, they had their own little statue and ladder of who and hierarchy. And you had the Scythians. Nobody wanted to invite the Scythians over to dinner. They were vulgar. They were crude. They belched in the middle of dinner, scratched when they shouldn't, eat with their hands. There used to be an old saying, right? Were you born in a barn? For these folks, it was, were you born a Scythian? So you have all of these people coming together in one house learning about God and hearing the teachings of Jesus. And the teachings of Jesus were contrary to the teachings of the world, no matter where they came from. By the way, we've had it happen here. We've had people here who have looked at me and said, this just isn't my kind of church. And I said, okay. I said, what do you mean by that, by the way? Well, for my career to advance, I need people in my field that I can interact with to advance my career. And I'm like, oh, yeah, we're probably not your kind of church. That's probably not what you need to be looking for. Because it's difficult when you have all the different things. So, the question I have for you is, do you have anyone who's high maintenance in your life? Please don't point to the people next to you. I'm already seeing half of you nudge. The first service, there was a husband that did something. Next thing I know, I said, don't do that. And then he had his arm around her trying to console her. Everybody is an EGR at some point in time. Everybody's extra grace required. We all at times go through difficult seasons in life and need that extra grace. But we're talking about sandpaper people. They just rub you the wrong way. There's an abrasive quality to them, right? So if someone calls you who's a close friend and they leave a message on your phone and you see you miss their call and you get the message right away, you're excited to call them back. Not sandpaper people. You lollygag a little bit because you know when you start to talk to them, they're not going to infuse you with energy. They're going to suck energy out of you. Do you know there's been studies that have been done that say when pastors, because their job is to interact with people so much, when pastors retire, they tend to lose weight because they're interacting with abrasive people so often they do comfort eating all the time. Do you know people that when they're around you just start to pick up bad habits? They put so much stress on you, you start to bite your fingernails. Some of them put so much stress on you, you start to bite your neighbor's fingernails. Now, if you are blessed and don't have any of those people in your life, God bless you. Call the church on Monday because we have a list of people, and we're happy to start handing them out to you so you... No, we don't. We're a healthy church. We're a healthy church. But I don't care if it's your family. I don't care if it's your workplace or even in church. Every now and then you're going to run across somebody who's abrasive, and it's hard to be around. And here's what our tendency is. I think I'll just get away from them. I think I'll just run. But here's a spiritual truth. The way you treat difficult people can reveal the condition of your heart. And having a difficult person in your life can help you grow spiritually in ways you may not otherwise grow. See, sometimes we romanticize the early church. We think, man, if I was just in the book of Acts and running around with the disciples, I'd have them lay hands on my back and I'd get a brand new spine because miracles were happening. But remember, Pastor Karen preached the other day, Peter got released, but James did not. He was killed. See, here's a second spiritual truth. God's power moved among the early church, but the church was not conflict-free. In Acts, conflict between the Greek and the Hebrew-speaking widows. In Acts 15, circumcised Christians and uncircumcised Christians. In Philemon, slave and the owner. Corinthians, there's quarreling among you. At one point, Paul said, if we can't get this figured out, we're going to stop the gospel from growing. We got to figure out how to live and care for one another, even with abrasive people. So here's the main question I have for you as we continue on. Who is your sandpaper person? Don't say it out loud. But in the back of your mind, who is a sandpaper person for you right now? Somebody that's just abrasive. It might be a family member. It may be at work. It can very well be at church. What does that person look like? This is the book I've been reading, Thinning the Veil. Encountering Jesus Christ in the book of Revelation. It's a fantastic book. Regardless of your position in the book of Revelation, you will like this book. I want to read a section, but it's a lengthy section. So I'm going to ask you to do your part. You know, in communication, there's two parts. Someone speaks and someone has to listen. I'm going to ask you to be intentional about staying with me, okay? Because I think if you'll do that, you're going to find out it was worth the effort. So turn to the person next to you and say, this will be worth the effort. So he reminds us that our action flows from our identity. So in Isaiah, he goes into the Old Testament and shows most of the times when the prophets were correcting people, It's because they needed to correct and remind themselves of who God is. Because when you know who God is, then you know who you are. And when you know who you are, you know what you're supposed to go do. Right? That makes sense? So in Isaiah chapter 1, if you go back and read Isaiah chapter 1, he's prophesying and saying, don't even sacrifice anymore. Don't even come sing songs to me. Don't lift your hands up. Just stop it. Because you do it one day, and the next day, you're just acting as if you don't even know who I am. And frankly, I'm just getting tired of it. You're giving me a bad name. Now, if you're willing to show up and know who I really am, then I'll wash you white as snow. And so we pick it up, and he says, action flows from identity. The identity of God's own is determined by who God is. This is precisely why Isaiah 1 gives the next 65 chapters filled with vivid depictions of who God is. From the branch of the Lord in Isaiah 4 to the suffering servant in Isaiah 53 to the heavenly throne room in Isaiah 6, a scene filled with smoke, chanting seraphim, and God enthroned. A scene, incidentally, like Revelation chapter 4 and chapter 5. Similar to Isaiah 1, the rebellion and resilience of the seven churches uncovers not just wavering or wayward conduct, but distortion or disregard for who God is, and as a result, for who they are as his people. Remember, Laodicea is one of these churches getting scolded 11 miles away and connected with Colossae. Listen to this line. Action flows from identity, and if they don't know who he is, then they don't know who they are, and they definitely won't know what to do. To correct the actions of the church, then, in the book of Revelation must begin with a reintroduction to the identity of God. Revelation chapter 4 and chapter 5 is indeed just that, albeit with a Jesus-infused twist. The tripartite holy, 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 that's what they're singing in the throne room, remember? We just sang it. Bellows like a beat of a drum, rhythmically reciting the same message. There is no one like our God. He is singularly unique, set apart, beyond replication, beyond fabrication, beyond expression or comprehension, for words cannot contain him, even as temples cannot house him. Which is why Exodus chapter 3:14 is so startling, scandalous even. That's where Moses sees him in the burning bush. As Moses stumbled upon holy ground in a barren desert, he accosted God with a question as simple as it is absurd. What is your name? The problem is that words limit, and names intentionally delimit, demarcate, and fix boundaries so that this is one who can be distinguished from that one. But by definition, God is limitless, boundaryless, Alpha and the Omega, beginning to the end, who was and is to come. Even still, God answers. He responds to Moses with the name. I am who I am, he replies with a movement of grace. You tell them, I am has sent me to you. In a name, God moves towards us, for us, limiting himself so the limited can know him, even if we only know him in part. Now listen to these last two paragraphs. The four living creatures continue their celestial psalm by qualifying God's uniqueness still further. He is holy because his power pervades all. He is the Almighty One, which literally means the one who commands all things and all people. Hear this line. But our definition of power, though, war with our understanding of God's identity. Because typically we define power with gradients of might, not acts of service, with swords of sovereignty, not of self-sacrifice, especially not for our enemies. But for the power of the Almighty God in Revelation chapter 4 is defined through the imagery of Christ in Revelation chapter 5, where we see Jesus sovereignly enthroned. How? As a slain lamb. Not as somebody who sits there and says, I have all the power, and flexes their muscle, but someone who says, I created you, see value in you, and I'll do whatever it takes to help you come to me, to the point of cross. And that's where we have a problem as the church. And Colossae had that same problem. You want me to get along with people that annoy the heck out of me. It's just easier for me to go. But it's not biblical. So Paul says, therefore, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved, now you know your God and your identity. I want you to clothe yourself with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. Sounds like the fruit of the Spirit, doesn't it? And then he says, I want you to bear with each other and forgive whatever grievances you may have against one another. Forgive as the Lord forgave you. So here's what I want us to do. We're just going to take a moment, and I want to just hit these words very quickly. And I want you to ask yourself, how am I doing? Because here's the thing about abrasive people and sandpaper people. We don't let them walk all over us. They don't get to rule the church. They don't get to walk all over us in life. But the question is, if you have a sandpaper person in your life, eventually you're going to have conflict. You want to make it healthy. Is the intention of your heart to get them out of the church because they annoy you? Or is the intention of your heart trying to get them to grow in faith as well as help me grow in faith? So it begins with compassion. Christianity brought mercy to the aged, the simple, and the sickly. Up to this point, when you got older and simple and sickly, if you weren't a Roman citizen, you were worthless. You were cast aside. You were dead weight. Christianity helped us see the value in them. Do you see value in our elderly at church? The simple, the sickly? Then he says kindness. Now this word we're going to rest in for a second because this is an important word. The virtue of a man whose neighbor's good is as dear to him as his own. This word in Matthew, easy, my yoke is easy. Remember Jesus said, all who are thirsty, all who are hungry, all who want to know about me, show up. My yoke is easy. That's the word kindness. It's the same word. Yoke is your understanding of the law. So he's looking and saying, listen, people, those of you who are following the law, there's over 613 subsets of that law. So some of you are so busy trying to do the law, you're getting legalistically and you're missing it all. Let me make it easy for you. Let me break it down to 2. Just love God with everything you have, with your muchness, with your heart, your mind. When you start to do that, he'll transform you so now you love your neighbor as yourself. Let me just make it easy for you. Here's the problem, is when we're in church and there's abrasive people around us, it's much easier to scratch our itch just to bloody them up, to yell at them, to ask them to leave. But what kindness is saying is eventually you're going to have a difficult conversation with them, but first sometimes you have to eat that. Because your job is to build a relationship, to love them intentionally, to move them to a place where they can hear the truth. But if you're going to do that, you're going to have to do it with humility. Mark, you're going to have to help me. I'll help you. We'll help each other. You know, we are finding, and we will, they told me for about a month, the lightning strike really did a number on all of our systems. So this is a little glitch. Let me read it for you. If you can get it to move, Mark, you get it to move, and I'll look at the screen. This is why I keep these little notes up here just in case. First, we're humbled as we know that we're created beings. Not the creator. All creation is God. God is the creator. We're not God. But because we've been created, because we've been forgiven, we now look for grace in others. Now, if we're going to do that, we have to do it with gentleness, which means we have to do it with power under control. We have the power to yell, to bite strong, to kick people out. We don't do that. Instead, we control our power. The word in the Sermon on the Mount, blessed are the meek, that's this word gentleness. It means you have the strength to do something, but you don't. But you're going to have patience. And that's one who does not allow the foolishness and unteachability of those around them to lead them to cynicism or to despair, wrath, or bitterness. Because I promise you, when you interact with abrasive people and you finally do have those difficult conversations, Some will say yes, but some will just get angry and leave. You can't lose your salvation as you interact with Sandpaper people. But the key comes down to this. Then it says, bear with one another. What does that mean? In the Greek, that word bear has two meanings, and Paul uses it in two different places. Here's what it means. Number one, it means I'm going to bear the burden. This person's annoying me. Jim is annoying me. I'd like to get into it with him, but he's not to a place where I can get into it with him. So what I'm going to do is befriend him. I'm going to care for him. I'm going to write notes to him. I'm going to be positive around him until I can get him to a place where I can speak truth and love and he can hear it and we both advance forward. But the second word for bear is we're just going to bear it open. At some point in time, we're going to have that difficult conversation. And so you say to somebody, what you did at small group, that's just not acceptable. You don't get to act and behave that way. I can't have you shutting everybody down and talking over them because you think you have a lot of Bible knowledge and you're just ripping them apart. Or what you did at small group, at some point you've got to let it be about other people. It can't just be consumed with you. We're going to lose people. Or difficult conversations. Hey, I want you to be the best you can be, and the church sure cares for you. Can we talk about your hygiene? Because people are complaining that it's difficult to sit next to you, and we're crowded. Or they've asked that you don't come to their house anymore for a small group because the furniture has an odor when you leave. There's things that you have to do, but you do it in love. And sometimes there's nothing you can do about it, and you're like, got it, understand, thank you. If you find joy in doing this, you're not in the right place. You're not in the right frame of mind at all. You shouldn't do it. This should be one of those things that's part of me bearing each other's burden is this process. This is what Paul's telling the Colossians. He's getting really serious with them here. So first you should serve them. And that means spending time praying for them. Here's the thing. If I were to go back 2-3 weeks and listen to a manuscript of how I talked about people that were on my nerves those 2 or 3 weeks, I don't know if I'd be very pleased with my presence in front of Jesus. So we serve them, we pray for them, and we see them. How many of you, I got some teachers in here, do they still do hearing lessons in school? Do they do that? Yeah? So when I grew up, did you all do hearing lessons? Hearing tests, not lessons, tests. Yeah. So as I got older, they put little headphones on us, and you'd listen for beeps. But I'm old enough, and I lived in a rural area of South Dakota, where until they did that, you would stand with your back to the teacher would say a sentence, and you would turn around and repeat it. Did anybody else do that? I'm really old. Thank you in the back. Just standing in solidarity with me. Mary Ann Berg remembers those times. She was born with a cleft palate, and kids can be cruel. We can be cruel to each other. She told people that she fell or was in a car accident because the kids would mock her about her looks. So they were having their hearing test, and class, you just do your homework. Just be quiet and pay attention to your homework. And then one by one, the kids would come up, stand at the doorway. She would stand a couple of feet behind them and say a sentence. They would turn around. So the first one, she said, the sky is blue. And the young man turned around and said, the sky is blue. And the second little girl got up and she said, you've got the prettiest new shoes. And she turned around and smiled and said, well, thank you. I do have new shoes. Now, Mary Ann came from a family that didn't buy her very many new shoes. She's just trying to survive through life, so she didn't notice the sky was blue. So now she's all freaked out because what is this person going to say to me? And so she stands there with her cleft palate, knowing that she's the thumb of the class. And the teacher got behind her and said, I wish you were my daughter. You're beautiful. She said, up to that point, now she's a pastor. She's preaching on this text. She said, up to that point, I was a barbarian. Worse yet, I was probably a Scythian. I was on the edge. I was always the last picked for anything. When that teacher said that to me, that changed the way I saw myself. It changed the way I understood God's love. And she said, it just changed how I live the rest of my life. Can we be candid? Sometimes some of you act like barbarians. Sometimes we could be pretty cruel to our spouses and not very loving to our children. And then we come to church and we're, hey, love Jesus. And our family's like, really? Okay. Because we all have those moments. Sometimes, if we want to be honest with ourselves, we all like to stand in the spotlight and steal it from others in small groups, wherever it may be. Paul says, church, if you're going to grow and be healthy, and it'll be difficult at times, but you've got to care for each other enough to have honest conversations. But if you're going to do it, you'd better have your heart right to do it correctly.